The 1970s produced music that came from somewhere modern production simply can't replicate. Real rooms, real musicians reading each other in real time, songs built on feel rather than formula. Some of those recordings have never been equaled. Here are 10 songs from the 70s that modern music still can't match. Number 10, Hotel California by Eagles, 1977.
On a dark desert highway.
The Eagles had been building towards something for most of the 1970s, working through country rock and California sound and the specific kind of polished, melancholy pop that Glenn Frey and Don Henley kept refining album by album. By 1977, they were one of the most commercially successful acts in American music, and Hotel California, the album and the song, was the moment when everything they had been working toward arrived at once. Hotel California was written by Don Felder, Don Henley, and Glenn Frey. Felder wrote the guitar part first, a demo he recorded on acoustic guitar at his Malibu home, and Henley built the lyric around the atmosphere it generated. The song was originally longer, and the process of editing it down to its final form was part of the negotiation between what the writers had and what the production needed.
Welcome to the Hotel California.
Felder's 12-string acoustic opening, Joe Walsh's electric leads, and Timothy B. Schmidt on bass gave the track a layered sound that took considerable studio time to achieve. Producer Bill Shimchick worked with the band at Criteria Studios in Miami and Record Plant in Los Angeles on the album. The mixing process for this song in particular was extensive. Henley and Frey were meticulous about the sound, and the sonic precision of the finished recording reflects that. The outro guitar solos, played by Felder and Walsh in tandem, a two-guitar conversation that resolves nothing and leaves everything suspended, were worked out carefully before recording and are among the most precisely constructed guitar passages in the American rock canon. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May 1977 and spent 1 week at the top.
Such a lovely place, such a lovely place.
The album Hotel California won the Grammy Award for Record of the Year in 1978. It has sold over 26 million copies worldwide. The specific combination of the California imagery, the gothic undertone of the lyric, the acoustic to electric production arc, and those final guitar solos has never been replicated because replication would require not just technical skill, but the specific conditions of that recording, those musicians in those rooms at that moment. When Don Felder brought that initial guitar demo to the band, he had no idea what it would eventually become. The distance between that home recording in Malibu and the finished master is the story of a band operating at the absolute peak of its craft. And that peak produced something that has outlasted the decade, the band's later commercial fortunes, and the changing tastes of 6 generations of radio listeners.
Any time of year, you can find it here.
Number 9, Superstition by Stevie Wonder, 1972.
Very superstitious.
Stevie Wonder turned 21 in 1971 and negotiated a new contract with Motown that gave him complete creative control over his recordings. What he did with that control between 1972 and 1976 was one of the most sustained periods of creative excellence in American popular music history. 5 albums in 4 years, Music of My Mind, Talking Book, Inner Visions, Fulfillingness First Finale, and Songs in the Key of Life. Each one ambitious, each one different, each one building on the last. Superstition was the lead single from Talking Book, released in October 1972. Wonder wrote the song and played almost every instrument on the recording: drums, clavinet, bass, piano, and synthesizers. The clavinet riff that opens the track and drives it throughout is one of the most immediately recognizable sounds in recorded popular music.
Very superstitious.
It has been sampled interpolated, and covered hundreds of times across 5 decades. And none of those versions has the specific quality of the original, which was recorded with Wonder performing the rhythm parts himself, and then overdubbing the other elements around them. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1973 and spent 1 week at the top. It also reached number 1 on the R&B chart. It won the Grammy Award for Best Rhythm and Blues Song in 1974. The groove of Superstition comes from the specific way Wonder played. The urgency and the pocket of the clavinet, the drumming that pushes slightly against the strictest mechanical tempo and creates a human feel that quantized modern production can't reproduce. Modern producers study this recording the way engineering students study bridges. Number 8, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, 1975. Freddie Mercury wrote Bohemian Rhapsody and presented it to the rest of Queen as a complete, fully formed composition. The 3-section structure, the operatic middle passage, the hard rock finale, before they went into the studio to record it. The recording took 3 weeks at Rockfield Studio in Wales and Sarm Studios in London. Queen recorded over 180 individual vocal overdubs to build the operatic section, stacking harmonies until the tape was approaching its physical limit for saturation. Brian May's guitar work on the rock section used his homemade guitar, the Red Special, built with his father from wood from a 100-year-old fireplace mantle and other salvaged materials, through a series of Vox AC30 amplifiers, with the volumes turned up to produce natural tube overdrive. Roger Taylor's drumming in the finale section has a power that comes from the combination of his playing and the specific acoustic properties of the studio room. Freddie Mercury's vocal performance across the entire song, from the intimate opening piano section to the full commitment operatic passages to the rock delivery, represents a technical and emotional range that has no modern equivalent. EMI Records wanted the song shortened. DJ Kenny Everett at Capitol Radio was given a copy with instructions not to play it. He played it 14 times in 2 days. The phones lit up. Bohemian Rhapsody spent 9 weeks at number 1 on the UK singles chart upon its original release. It was later certified as the most streamed song of the 20th century on Spotify. The specific combination of compositional ambition, technological limitation overcome by human creativity, and one of the great vocal performances in recorded music makes it unrepeatable. Number 7, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, 1971.
Brother, brother, brother.
Marvin Gaye spent years as one of Motown's most commercially reliable artists, a genuine singer with significant commercial pull who was nevertheless expected to record what the label gave him, rather than what he wanted to make. In 1970, he decided that was finished. He was going to make the album he wanted to make, about the things he wanted to address, in the way he thought it should be done. Berry Gordy at Motown told him the title track was the worst thing I've ever heard. Gaye released it anyway. What's Going On was written by Gaye, Al Cleveland, and Ronaldo Obi Benson of the Four Tops. Benson had witnessed police violence at a 1969 anti-war demonstration in San Francisco and had come away wanting to write about it. He brought the idea to Gaye, who took it somewhere else entirely.
What's going on? Yeah, what's going on?
The recording was made in June 1970 at Hitsville, USA in Detroit, using an approach that was unusual for Motown, a party atmosphere in the studio, multiple musicians playing simultaneously, Gaye double-tracking his vocal against himself in a way that gave the lead line a specific floating conversational quality. The The song reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. It was later ranked number 1 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time in the magazine's 2021 revision. The album What's Going On was ranked number 1 on Rolling Stone's greatest albums list in the same revision, the first time the album had taken that position after years at number 6.
Oh, what's going on? What's going on?
What Gaye created in 1971 was a complete artistic statement that changed what American popular music could address and how it could sound doing it. After the album's release, Berry Gordy acknowledged he had been wrong about it. Gaye had insisted on making it, had fought for it, and had been proven correct by the response: commercial, critical, and historical. What's Going On broke a template that had been in place at Motown since the label's founding. The template that said the label's music was entertainment first and statement second. Gaye's refusal to accept that constraint produced the greatest album Motown ever released, by the near-universal assessment of anyone who has studied the label's catalog across the following 50 years. Number 6, Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, 1971. Led Zeppelin had never released Stairway to Heaven as a single. Jimmy Page and Robert Plant wrote it in a single extended session at Headley Grange, the rural Hampshire country house where Led Zeppelin recorded much of Led Zeppelin 4. Page used the recording environment, the natural acoustics of the old stone building, the ability to place microphones at distances from the source, to build a sound that could not have been created in a conventional studio. The recording opens with Jimmy Page's acoustic guitar figure, played on a Harmony Sovereign acoustic, and adds elements progressively. John Paul Jones on recorder, the gradual introduction of the electric band. Robert Plant's vocal building from intimacy to the full-throated delivery of the final section. John Bonham's drums do not enter until the song is already 5 minutes old, and their arrival on a recording that had been building with acoustic instruments for all that time is one of the more powerful moments in rock music.
There's a lady who's sure.
The song has been played on American FM radio more than any other song in the history of the format. It is the most requested song in American radio history. Page's guitar solo, played on his 1959 Gibson Les Paul, the number 1, was completed in a very small number of takes, and its specific quality comes from the way he played in that room on that day. The combination of the architecture of the song, the acoustic environment of Headley Grange, and the performances of musicians who had been playing together for years at that point has never been replicated. Led Zeppelin did not release Stairway to Heaven as a single in the United States. It was not promoted in the conventional sense. It spread entirely through FM radio and word of mouth. Listeners heard it, told other listeners, and by the time the mid-1970s arrived, it was already the most played song on American FM. Its journey to that position, without any of the conventional commercial machinery, is itself a document of what genuine quality can do without assistance. The song exists on its own terms and always has. Number 5, I Will Always Love You by Dolly Parton, 1973. Dolly Parton wrote I Will Always Love You in 1973 as a farewell to her professional partner and mentor Porter Wagoner, with whom she had worked for 7 years on his television show. She was leaving to pursue a solo career, and the song was her way of saying goodbye while acknowledging what the partnership had meant. Wagoner initially tried to block her departure, and she played him the song as part of the conversation about her leaving. He let her go. She recorded it for RCA Records, and it reached number 1 on the Billboard Country chart in 1974, staying there for 1 week. She re-recorded it, and it reached #1 again in 1982, the only time the same artist took the same song to #1 twice in country music. The original 1974 recording is the version that established the song. Parton's voice on the recording has a combination of warmth and restraint that comes from the specific emotional context in which the song was written and performed. It is a song about leaving someone you love, and the performance communicates that it was written from genuine experience. Whitney Houston's 1992 version, For the Bodyguard, became one of the best-selling singles in history, reaching #1 in more than 20 countries. Parton received the songwriting royalties, which she used, by her own account, to buy a building on Music Row in Nashville. The original recording and Houston's version represent two entirely different approaches to the same song, and both are achievements. But Parton's 1974 original has a specificity and an emotional restraint that the later production, by design, didn't pursue. The song was a personal statement before it was a vocal showcase. #4, Layla by Derek and the Dominoes, 1970. Layla was recorded in August and September 1970 at Criteria Studios in Miami, Florida. The band, Eric Clapton, Bobby Whitlock, Carl Rattle, and Jim Gordon, had been rehearsing and performing together for several months before the Miami sessions, and the sound they had developed was different from anything Clapton had recorded before. Harder, more emotionally direct, less controlled. Duane Allman joined the sessions after meeting Clapton in Miami, and his slide guitar work transformed several of the recordings. The song was written by Clapton and Gordon. Clapton's love for George Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd, an unrequited and deeply painful situation at the time of the recording, was the emotional driver for the lyric. The specific desperation in the performance was not manufactured. The main guitar riff was developed in the studio from Clapton's and Allman's conversations about what the song needed. Allman's slide guitar in the verses plays against Clapton's lead in a way that gives the song a dueling, escalating quality that neither man could have produced alone. The piano coda, which follows the main song and feels like a separate, entirely different piece of music, was composed by Jim Gordon and added to the recording as a way of giving the song an emotional resolution that the main section couldn't find. Gordon had the melody from a piece he had been working on independently, and the decision to append it to Layla gave the recording a specific arc, from anguish to something approaching peace. The full version runs over 7 minutes. The specific conditions of the Miami sessions, the intensity of the emotional context, Allman's presence, the raw sound the band had developed, are not reproducible. Duane Allman died in a motorcycle accident in Macon, Georgia on October the 29th, 1971, less than a year after the Miami sessions. He was 24 years old. The recordings he made at Criteria with the Dominoes represent a concentrated demonstration of what he was capable of at his peak. On Layla specifically, the way his slide responds to Clapton's lead, not playing against it, but playing with it, finding the space in what Clapton had already played and filling it, is an object lesson in what musical conversation between two gifted people sounds like when it's working perfectly. #3, Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, 1977. The Rumors album was recorded while Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were breaking up, while Christine McVie and John McVie were divorcing, and while Mick Fleetwood's marriage was ending. The 5 people in the studio were each other's primary professional partners and were each going through the dissolution of their most significant personal relationships simultaneously. The album they made in those circumstances became the best-selling album of 1977 and spent 31 weeks at #1 on the Billboard 200. Dreams was written by Stevie Nicks at the record plant in Sausalito, California, in one sitting. She wrote it in a back room while the rest of the band was working on other material, sitting at a piano that wasn't being used, wearing headphones, playing a Buckingham drum groove she had taken from the recording console. The song that emerged from that session was the only #1 single Fleetwood Mac ever had on the Billboard Hot 100. It reached the top in June 1977. The production that Ken Kalat and Richard Dashiot built around Nicks's vocal and Lindsey Buckingham's guitar arrangement gave the track a specific floating quality, the sound of something moving forward while looking back. Buckingham's guitar work on Dreams is understated in a way that was characteristic of his best production decisions for Nicks's songs. He served the material rather than competing with it, the song's endurance, its steady streaming presence nearly 5 decades later. The viral moment in 2020 when a skateboarding man drinking cranberry juice, mouthing the words on his way to work, sent the song back to the charts and introduced it to a generation born decades after its release, comes from the fact that it captures a very specific emotional experience with precision that has no expiration date. The irony of Rumors is that 5 people in varying degrees of personal turmoil produced the best work of their lives because of that turmoil, rather than despite it. The pain was real. The professional discipline was real. The combination of the two produced an album that has sold over 40 million copies worldwide, one of the best-selling albums in history, and a lead single whose first note still stops a room. Number 2, Lean on Me by Bill Withers, 1972. Bill Withers was 33 years old when he wrote Lean on Me. He had spent his adult life working in factories and as an aircraft mechanic for the United States Navy before releasing his debut album at 30 in 1970. The experience of working for a living, of being in communities of people who depended on each other practically and not just sentimentally, is audible in everything he wrote, and Lean on Me is its most concentrated expression. He wrote the song in 1972, drawing on memories of the community of Slab Fork, West Virginia, where he had grown up, the specific quality of a small town where people's survival was genuinely interdependent, and where the notion of leaning on your neighbors was not a metaphor, but a practical description of how life worked.
Lean on me.
The recording was made at Muscle Shoals Sound Studio in Sheffield, Alabama, with the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, Barry Beckett, Roger Hawkins, David Hood, and Jimmy Johnson, a group of musicians who had worked together so long that they functioned as a single instrument. Lean on Me reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in July 1972 and spent 3 weeks at the top. It also reached #1 on the R&B chart. It has been covered hundreds of times. It has been performed at presidential inaugurations, at memorial services, at moments of collective grief and collective celebration for over 50 years. The reason it continues to serve all of these occasions is that Withers wrote it with specificity about something universal, the need and the capacity to help each other.
When you're not strong.
And the recording communicates that specificity without sentimentality or performance. It sounds like someone who meant it because he did. Withers made 5 studio albums between 1971 and 1985, and then, at the height of a commercially productive period, walked away from the music industry entirely. He gave a handful of interviews in his later years in which he spoke about his decision with characteristic directness. He had done what he wanted to do, and he was not interested in doing it just to keep doing it. He died in March 2020. Lean on Me was played at tributes around the world. It had already outlasted every trend and fashion that had surrounded it, and it will outlast the ones that will surround the next generation of music the same way.
Somebody to lean on.
Number 1, Imagine by John Lennon, 1971.
Imagine there's no heaven.
John Lennon wrote Imagine in 1971, drawing on concepts from Yoko Ono's book Grapefruit, 1964. The idea of using the imagination as an instrument for changing what people believe is possible. The song was recorded at Ascot Sound Studios, located at Lennon and Ono's estate Tittenhurst Park in Berkshire, England. The recording session for the basic track took place on May 27, 1971. The piano part was recorded first, Lennon playing a Steinway grand in the studio at Tittenhurst, with the specific resonance of that instrument in that room captured in the recording. Nicky Hopkins added piano overdubs. Klaus Voormann played bass. Alan White played drums. George Harrison contributed slide guitar to the album, but his contribution to this specific track is less prominent than on other songs. Phil Spector and Lennon co-produced the record, and Spector's orchestral arrangement, strings added at a later session, gave the recording the specific quality of expanding outward from the intimate piano opening.
Imagine all the people.
The song reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States, but reached number 1 in the United Kingdom, Australia, and numerous other countries. After Lennon's murder in December 1980, it was re-released and reached number 1 in the United Kingdom. It has been played at virtually every major peace-related public event in the world since its release. UNESCO included it in its Memory of the World Register. The United Nations has adopted it in connection with various peace initiatives. What makes Imagine unrepeatable is not its melody, which is simple, or its production, which is elegant but not technically extraordinary. It is the combination of the absolute clarity of the sentiment, the specific historical moment it was made in, the Vietnam War at its height, social division at its most acute, and the quality of Lennon's vocal performance, which communicates genuine conviction rather than performance. He wrote it at 30 years old, having been a Beatle, having survived the dissolution of the most consequential band in popular music history, and having arrived at a belief that the imagination was more powerful than any of the forces arrayed against peace.
You may say I'm a dreamer.
The recording is that belief made audible. Lennon was murdered outside his apartment in New York City on December 8, 1980. He was 40 years old. In the days and weeks that followed, Imagine was played continuously on radio stations around the world, not because anyone scheduled it, but because it was the song that people reached for when they needed to say something that language alone couldn't say. That function has not changed. It plays at memorial services, at peace demonstrations, at moments of collective grief and collective aspiration, and it serves all of those occasions because Lennon wrote it from somewhere real. The specific alignment of the melody, the lyric, the production, and the moment in which it was made. 1971, Vietnam, the Cold War, the wreckage of the 1960s idealism cannot be recreated by intention. It emerged from specific conditions that no longer exist, and it carries those conditions in every bar.
And the world will live as one.
If any of these took you straight back, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more deep dives into the music that mattered waiting for you.